Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 177 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. You can also check out my podcast network, the Eagles Pin Pull Network, wherever you stream your podcasts. We're on YouTube at Eagles Pin Pull, and so you can find us at any of those spots. I'm here today to break down Week 9 of the NFL slate, specifically focusing on the NFC East, but also just all the games that were played on Sunday. I am flying solo again for this episode. Mark's been real hit or miss with work stuff over the last couple of weeks, and so you get me reacting to all of these games. I'll give you kind of the story of the game, my top takeaways for the teams, and you can know what's going on all around the NFL, even if you're specifically zeroed in on the Eagles. And so, as always, drop some comments here as we talk through the games, and I'll react to your live comments and questions as well. And so let's dive in, and we'll start, as we always do, with the Eagles' divisional rivals. Let's go first to Atlanta, where the Dallas Cowboys lose to the Atlanta Falcons 21-27. The Cowboys fall to 3-5 on the season, while the Falcons go to 6-3. And there's a lot of injuries coming out of this game. The Falcons lost Drake London early in this game to a hip injury, and then they lost Grady Jarrett to an Achilles strain. The Cowboys lost Dak Prescott to, he had both a hamstring injury and a hand injury he was dealing with. CeeDee Lamb had a shoulder injury that he's going to have an MRI on. And so lots of injuries coming out of this game. Obviously, the Eagles play Dallas this upcoming weekend, and so we'll be monitoring injury reports for that one very closely. But it could potentially be Cooper Rush getting the start against the Eagles in Dallas on Sunday. The Falcons came into this game with a concerted effort to get Bijan Robinson involved. He got the nod early in this game. He had 13 touches in the Falcons' first 18 plays. And he ended the day with 26 touches for 145 yards between rushing and receiving. The Falcons' pass rush also got going in this game. They sacked Dak Prescott 3 times, and they only had 6 sacks coming into the season as a whole. And so their pass rush got going a little bit. Obviously, they made the move for Josh Uche at the trade deadline. Technically, the trade deadline's tomorrow, but he's not one of the guys that had a sack in this game, but he was out there playing a little bit. And Dak left this game when the Cowboys were down 27-13 in the fourth quarter, which is a time you expect Dak to do his normal Dak thing and rack up garbage time stats. And this time it was Cooper Rush doing that. He came in and led a late touchdown drive. Cooper Rush ends up going 13-25 for 115 yards and a touchdown. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. The Falcons are able to put this game away, but there was just a lot of inefficiencies for the Cowboys in this game. They were 3 of 13 on third downs. They were 0 of 3 on fourth downs. Mike McCarthy had a boneheaded decision to call a fake punt on his own 38-yard line on 4th and 2 on the opening drive of the second half. They were down 14-10. And I don't have a problem going for it on 4th and 2 at your own 38 if you want to do that. I'm not a big fake punt guy. And if you're going to run a fake punt, I don't love the design being my punter throwing to a gunner out wide, because that guy's going to get jammed anyways. It should be some sort of shovel to an up back or a run play or a direct snap, something. I just don't really like the punter passing the ball and certainly not throwing it out to the boundary. And it didn't work. Shocking. A punter underthrew a pass. And then Atlanta scored quickly to go to a 21-10 lead. And so the Cowboys are now chasing points. They were going to go for it on their next drive. They were flagged for 12 men in the huddle and ended up not going for it. Yeah, we've got a comment here from Brett Eclipse that the Cowboys don't elicit an ounce of fear in anyone. This has been a pretty toothless team so far this year, and we'll see how the Eagles do next week. But the one positive, I guess, for the Cowboys out of this game is they did have a good rushing attack. That's something they've struggled with. I think they've had like 4 or 5 games under 80 rushing yards, and in this game they had 137 rushing yards on 6.5 yards per carry. Rico Dowdle had 75 yards on 12 carries. CeeDee Lamb had 2 carries for 15 yards. And they had 5 explosive runs, which are runs of 10 or more yards. Also worth noting, the Falcons have a poor run defense, and Grady Jarrett was injured during the game. So I'm not sure that that's Dallas turning a corner so much as catching a favorable matchup, but we'll see if they can build on their rushing attack. They're kind of going to have to if Dak Prescott is going to be out next weekend. One more note on the Falcons side, Falcons linebacker Caden Ellis did set season highs in tackles with 13, in defensive stops, which is a tackle that generates negative EPA for the offense, at 9, and pressures at 5. And he also recorded his first sack of the season. And so the Falcons have clearly grabbed hold of the NFC South, especially with the injuries that the Bucs had mount at wide receiver. And the Cowboys are clearly continuing to fall out of the NFC East. So let's roll on to the Washington Commanders at the New York Giants. And Washington wins this game 27-22. And I just don't think this game was ever really as close as the scoreboard suggests. The Commanders were up 21-7 at halftime. And it really only became a 1-score game when the Giants scored with under 3 minutes left. Then the Commanders just ran the rest of the time off the clock. They only got to a third down once on that final drive, and it was all the way down inside the Giants' 5-yard line. So, presumably in a stop situation, they could kick a chip shot field goal to go up by 8. Jaden Daniels was fantastic in this game. 15 of 22 passing for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. He ran for 35 yards, but he had 0.54 EPA per dropback, which was a 95th percentile QB performance. He was 3 of 3 on deep passes. On the season as a whole, Jaden Daniels has generated 25.5 expected points on deep dropbacks this season, which is the 3rd highest number in the NFL. And so he's continuing to connect on deep balls really well. He's not really making a lot of mistakes. Just playing really good football right now. And the Eagles have a matchup with them looming off of a short week after the Dallas game. And so a lot of divisional matchups coming up. The Giants blitzed Jaden Daniels on 60% of his dropbacks in this game, and they only generated pressure on 20% of the dropbacks. The Commanders had a 53% rushing success rate despite missing Brian Robinson Jr. as they rushed for 149 yards and a touchdown. And so the Commanders' offense is humming. On the Giants side, they came out running the football in this game. In their first 17 plays, they only had 2 dropbacks, and the second dropback was a Daniel Jones fumble. At halftime, Daniel Jones had an incredible stat line. I posted a screenshot on Twitter yesterday, but he was 4 of 6 passing for 0 yards and a touchdown, which is just crazy to think about that. Throwing 6 passes in the first half, completing 4 of them and getting a touchdown, but having 0 passing yards. If you want to go net yards, where you subtract the sacks, he had -8 net passing yards. But the Giants did score on all 3 of their second half drives, but it was too much of a hole to climb out of as they're unable to finish a comeback against the Commanders. Again, in a game that you never shut it off because it was always close on the scoreboard, but it just never really felt that close. Brett Eclipse asking on YouTube, are the Commanders showing any exploitable weaknesses on either side of the ball? I think there's weaknesses on the defense. The Giants ran the ball really well on them. And even Daniel Jones ends up 20 of 26 on the day passing. And so I think there's some things you can take advantage of defensively against the Commanders. Offensively, they look like they're firing on all cylinders. And, Cliff Kingsbury's offenses have traditionally faded down the stretch. We're 9 weeks into the season and there's no sign of that yet. So I'm very curious to see what the Eagles scheme up. And they've got a big matchup this week. Is it against the Ravens? I can't remember who they play this week. The Steelers. They go Steelers at Philadelphia. versus Dallas. There's some big games coming up here for the Commanders that I think we can get a good bead on what they're going to be. Okay, let's get into the Thursday night action, where this was kind of a boring game. Houston loses to the Jets in New Jersey, 21-13, and Garrett Wilson's catch is the storyline of this game. If you didn't see that since Thursday, go look up the highlight. Early in the fourth quarter, he makes a one-handed cross-body grab, and he gets a foot and a shin in bounds. And I have no idea how that was ruled a catch on replay. They said the shin is down, and so he was in bounds. I don't see how you can separate the shin coming down in bounds and the knee coming down out of bounds, since it's like a straight surface. It's not like your shin is bendy. It's not a straw, right? I don't know how they could say that he was in bounds, but they ruled it that way regardless, even if they hadn't. It was just a fantastic catch. So incredible catch by Garrett Wilson. Other than that, this was a really sloppy game. Aaron Rodgers only had 32 first half passing yards. CJ Stroud was 11 of 30 in this game passing, and he was sacked 8 times. And in the last 3 games, Stroud has an 11 for 30 game and a 10 for 21 game. He's got 1 touchdown versus 14 sacks over the last 3 weeks. And they're dealing with some injuries for sure. Stephon Diggs is injured. Nico Collins is injured. And so it's rough playing without, your top 2 receivers. And Eagles fans certainly know something about that with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith being out for a little stretch before the bye. And their pass protection's been horrible. And so I think Stroud is fine. I think there's a lot of Stroud just having to try to overcome too much weakness offensively. But Brett Eclipse says that the Texans will arguably be the weakest playoff team from the AFC. And if they can't shore up their protection up front, that's definitely going to be the case. Joe Mixon was able to run in this game for 106 yards. And so having the running game is nice. They get Nico Collins back, but the protection's probably going to continue to be an issue for the Texans. And then on the Jets side, Malachi Corley had one of the bonehead moves of the week. I don't understand how this happens, but players do this consistently enough. He had an end around for a 19-yard touchdown, except it turns out he dropped the ball before he crossed the goal line, and it led to a touchback for the Texans. This was his second career touch. If you're running into the end zone with your second career touch in the NFL, I would never let that ball go. I wouldn't even spike it. I wouldn't drop the ball. I'm taking that ball with me, right? I definitely wouldn't drop it before I went into the end zone. I don't understand how NFL players can do that. I think I would have crippling anxiety. I would run all the way out of the back of the end zone before I dropped it. But it baffles me every time a player does that. I think it's one of the stupidest things you can do in sports. And I really don't get how you just don't cross the goal line before dropping the ball. The Deshaun Jackson spirit lives on, as YouTube chimes in. And yeah, it's not just, I'm not picking on Malachi Corley. He's just the latest guy to do it, but it seems like this happens a few times a year. And it just baffles me that this happens. So, another comment here that Nakobe Dean probably went to sleep with his first interception ball. He gets that interception in the end zone and he took it with him to the podium, never letting that ball go. Malachi Corley needed to do the same, and the Jets might have won this game a little bit easier than they did. But they win anyways, and so you move on, you learn from your mistakes. So let's get into the Denver Broncos at the Baltimore Ravens. And this is a game that tells you a lot about the Ravens, because Lamar Jackson took a sack out of field goal range on the Ravens' opening drive, and they scored on their next 7 possessions before finally punting when they were up 41-10 with 5 minutes left in the game. Lamar Jackson was incredible in this game. He had a 99th percentile EPA per play performance, despite only carrying the ball 3 times for 4 yards, 16-19 passing for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. Derrick Henry forced 13 missed tackles and rushed for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Ravens put up 41 points on the Broncos, who had the number 1 defense by EPA per play. So this is a spectacular defense. The offense hasn't been good for them, but the defense has been really good, and they just could not get a stop. The Ravens offense looking really good. On the defensive side of the ball, I do think they're still struggling to rush the passer. Now, they had 4 sacks on the day, but they only had 8 pressures. And against a better quarterback than Bo Nix, they're not going to have a 50% pressure to sack rate. And this is a team that struggled with pass rushing. I've mentioned that a few times over the last couple of weeks. I think they're a team to keep an eye on for pass rush help ahead of the trade deadline tomorrow. But, we'll see if any moves are made there. Outside of Lamar and Derrick Henry in the defense, Zay Flowers also had a really good game. He had 5 catches for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns on 6 receptions. And of course, for Denver, Cortland Sutton had a really good game, 7 catches for 122 yards. But with this game, Lamar Jackson has the perfect passer rating. And he has the most games with a perfect passer rating with a minimum of 15 attempts at 4 in NFL history. That's not bad for a guy that everybody wanted to be a running back. So shout out to Lamar, playing incredible football right now. Lamar Jackson should definitely be the favorite for MVP. And, hopefully he's able to carry some of that success on into the postseason, where it has been a struggle at times for the Ravens. Okay, speaking of struggles, let's go to Buffalo, where the Buffalo Bills had some struggles against the Miami Dolphins in this game. The second half of this game was wild. After a Miami fumble, it went Bills touchdown, Dolphins field goal, Bills touchdown, Dolphins touchdown, Bills touchdown, Dolphins touchdown, as the offense just exploded. And then it's tied with 1:38 left after the Dolphins scored their final touchdown. And Josh Allen takes a sack on the first play. So the clock's running. Now it's 2nd and 14 with under a minute to go on your own 26-yard line, only one timeout. And the Bills managed to get into field goal range. Now they were aided by Chop Robinson, neutral zone infraction. They were aided by a Jordan Poyer unnecessary roughness penalty. But then Tyler Bass hits a 61-yard field goal to win the game. By the way, he also missed an extra point in this game. And so the confidence to trot your kicker out there, a kicker you've actively been trying to replace, by the way, because he's struggled this year, to trot him out for a 61-yard field goal attempt instead of letting Josh Allen launch it into the end zone, or even punting it away, because there wasn't a lot of time left. It was, it was 4th and 10, 5 seconds left. No, there were 17 seconds left. So there's technically enough time left in that situation that the Dolphins could do something real quick if they get it. But you have the willingness to go do that, and your kicker pays you off. And it was a game of missed opportunities for the Dolphins. They lost a fumble in the first half. Raheem Mostert coughed one up. They had the aforementioned penalties that cost them key yardage. And Tua played well. He was 25 of 28 for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the Dolphins lose yet again to drop to 2-6. And it's a lost season. We can call a spade a spade. The Dolphins season is pretty much over. And that's got to be disappointing, because I think they had pretty high expectations for themselves before the season kind of derailed with Tua's injury. Josh Allen in this game, it was a strange game for him. He didn't do anything on the ground, 2 rushes for 7 yards. He had an average depth of target of 3.6 yards, which is the lowest of his career. And 81% of the team's passing yards came after the catch. The Dolphins were just determined not to let him beat them deep, and he continued to move the ball and take his checkdowns. And he had a really nice pass on a 4th and goal to Mac Hollins late in the game. And then he had an incredible pass to Quentin Morris in the 4th quarter while under pressure, improvising, that put another touchdown on the board. And so Sean McDermott moves to 15-2 as a head coach of the Buffalo Bills against the Miami Dolphins. Just a totally dominant one-sided divisional matchup over the last 8-9 years. So let's keep rolling here, and let's go to Carolina, where the Carolina Panthers pick up a win 23-22 over the New Orleans Saints. Bryce Young goes 16 of 26 in this game for 171 yards and a touchdown. He did throw an interception, and he took a sack. Now, his interception's a travesty, because he hit Xavier Legette perfectly down the right sideline while on the run. It was a deep ball rolling out right, and Legette let the Saints cornerback strip the ball away from him. Not all interceptions are created equal, and honestly, that ball was right in the basket. You could almost chart that as a catch and a fumble from Xavier Legette, but it was certainly his fault and not Bryce Young. So you hate that his box score gets tainted with that, because I thought he played fairly well in this game. He also led a game-winning drive while down 5 with 3 minutes and 26 seconds left. It went 4 plays and 64 yards. The Panthers defense then got a turnover on downs to seal the game. So Bryce Young played a solid game. He gets the game-winning drive. Had a good connection with Jatavian Sanders, the rookie tight end out of Texas, who had 4 catches for 87 yards. JT Sanders also drew a big pass interference on the Panthers' final drive to help get them down closer to the goal line. On the Saints side, Alvin Kamara had another nice day. He has 29 carries for 155 yards. He was also the leader in receptions and yards at 6 receptions for 60 yards for the Saints offense. And he has now topped 1,000 scrimmage yards for his 8th straight season. Meanwhile, Derek Carr became the first quarterback in NFL history to lose a start versus 31 NFL teams. He can complete that cycle in week 17 if he starts and loses to the Raiders, his former team. And so we can check back in on that stat in week 17. I'm kind of pulling for that one to come true. But the Saints outgained the Panthers by 150 yards in this game. They rushed for over 150 yards, and they won the turnover battle. And in the last 20 years, teams that have done that are 275-0. No more. Now they're 275-1. And the Saints responded by firing Dennis Allen. He ends his head coaching career in New Orleans with an 18-25 record. In his previous head coaching stint, he was at Oakland, and he was 8-28 as a head coach. And so he has an overall head coach record of 26-53. And ironically, the starting quarterback when he was fired in Oakland was Derek Carr. So Derek Carr, the starting quarterback at both places, Dennis Allen, has been fired. All right, let's keep rolling to Cincinnati. And Cincinnati shook off a rough performance against the Eagles last week with a dominating win over the Las Vegas Raiders, 41-24. Joe Burrow had an incredible day. He goes 27 of 39 passing for 251 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The Bengals scored on their first 5 offensive possessions of the day, and Burrow became the only quarterback with more than one 5-touchdown passing performance this season. They also look like they could have a bell cow running back, as Chase Brown was the only running back to get carries in Cincinnati. He had 27 carries for 120 yards. He also added 5 catches for 37 yards, and he had a receiving touchdown. And after a rough week last week against Fred Johnson, Trey Hendrickson bounced back this week. He had 4 sacks and 10 pressures on 30 pass rushing snaps. That 33.3% pressure rate is the highest of the season. And on the Raiders side, it's just hard to overstate how bad this organization has been. And the Raiders have fired 3 coaches after this game. 3 coaches they hired this offseason. They got 9 games and fired these guys. They've benched Gardner Minshew twice for 2 different quarterbacks, including in this game, benching him for Desmond Ridder. He was previously benched for Aiden O'Connell, who hurt his thumb. They brought Minshew back. Now he's benched for Ridder. And on top of all that, this is the 4th time in 5 years the Raiders have changed either a head coach or a coordinator midseason. And so this is kind of a dumpster fire. Not kind of. This is a total dumpster fire. And I would imagine Antonio Pierce is going to be on his way out if there's not a major turnaround, somewhere down the stretch. So Raiders falling apart. The Bengals notched this win. They get to 4-5. I still think the Bengals are a legitimate playoff team, but they have very small margin for error. Like, you're probably going to need to get to 10-6. Maybe you can get in at 9-7, but you can't lose more than 1 or 2 games the rest of the season. And so we'll see if the Bengals are able to pull it off. YouTube chimes in and says that Cam Ward to the Raiders. I heard rumors that the Raiders were in the quarterback hunt this offseason. Obviously, they end up with Gardner Minshew, but I think a lot of people connected them to Michael Penix Jr. It would not surprise. Well, they should absolutely be trying to make a move for a quarterback this offseason, whether that be in free agency or in the draft. So let's keep rolling now. Let's go to Los Angeles at Cleveland. Well, it was at Cleveland, not Los Angeles, but let's go to Cleveland and talk about the Chargers winning 27-10. And don't look now, but Justin Herbert is heating up. The Chargers sit at 5-3. In their last 3 games, Justin Herbert's thrown for 910 yards with 4 touchdowns and no picks. This is his 6th straight start without an interception, which is the longest active streak in the NFL right now. And he connected with Quentin Johnston for 118 yards and a touchdown. He got Ladd McConkey involved, 5 receptions for 64 yards on 7 targets. He was pressured on 53% of his dropbacks, but he was 7 of 11 against pressure. Overall, just played a really solid game for, again, the 3rd game in a row. And so the Chargers are starting to surge a little bit. Obviously, they're not going to catch the Chiefs, but this is a team that I think you're going to see in the playoffs in one of those wild card spots, especially if the defense continues to play at such a high level. And Jameis Winston in the most Jameis Winston way possible. After the 300-yard performance last week, this week he tosses 3 interceptions. He takes 6 sacks. This is just the Jameis Winston career arc. Some games he will just dominate for you. Some games he's going to lose for you, but that's nothing new because Deshaun Watson lost pretty much every game for the Browns. And so I think you'll take the good. You got to live with the bad. The Browns definitely need a quarterback as well. There's a lot of teams that need a quarterback. And yeah, Jameis Winston, it's just flip a coin. You know, which Jameis Winston are you going to get today? And this week it was the bad one. Okay, let's keep rolling here. We're going to go to Tennessee. New England falls to Tennessee 17-10 in overtime. And honestly, I don't really find anything interesting about this game. I don't find either of these teams interesting other than Drake May. So I'm just going to talk about Drake May. He had 8 carries for 95 yards in this game. The Patriots' second leading rusher was Ramondre Stevenson, who had 16 yards on 10 carries. And so Drake May is literally being asked to do everything on his own. He has no running game. The offensive line's not very good. He doesn't have weapons in the receiving game. He's throwing to Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne, and Ramondre Stevenson. Like, this is a rough situation. And yet, he rushes for 95 yards. He throws for 206 and a touchdown. He became the 7th rookie in the Super Bowl era to have over 200 passing yards and over 90 rushing yards in the game. And he got the ball down 7 with 1:45 left at midfield and no timeouts after a good punt return. And he orchestrated a game-tying drive, including he connects with Hunter Henry for 10 yards on a 4th and 2 and spikes the ball with 8 seconds left. They run a pass, it's incomplete, and they've got one more chance. And if you haven't seen this play, go look it up too. But the Titans only rush 3, and he scrambles for 11.82 seconds before he connected with Ramondre Stevenson for the game-tying touchdown. And even on that, he's like in the grasp, going to the ground, and lobs it up to him. And it was a good catch by Ramondre Stevenson, but that was the second longest time to throw on a touchdown in the next gen stats era. And it only trails Jaden Daniels' Hail Mary last week. So it's good recognition of a 3-man rush. Good job staying alive and finally making something happen. Now, he wasn't all good. He had 2 fumbles, one of which he lost. He had 2 interceptions, including one in overtime that ended the game. But again, Drake May's in a really bad situation. He's had 6 passing touchdowns, and 290 rushing yards so far. And he's the first rookie to ever have 5 or more touchdowns and 200 or more rushing yards in his first 5 starts. And so it's a rough season for Patriots fans. You're probably going to be in contention for the number 1 pick. But man, Drake May's looked good, and I think there's a lot of good things to take away, a lot of positives. You would much rather be the Patriots right now than you would be some of these other teams we've talked about, the Browns or the Raiders or the Saints, that just don't really have any hope. You have hope of the future with Drake May, and so you definitely want to cling to that. Okay, let's get into the afternoon slate, and we're going to go to Arizona, where the Chicago Bears lay an egg against the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals win 29-9, and so it's been a rough 2-week stretch for the Bears. They lose on the Hail Mary last week. Now they get embarrassed by the Cardinals. In this game, 13 different Cardinals recorded a pressure. They came into the game with a 26.6% pressure rate, and they had a 46% pressure rate in this game. They even had sacks on 3 consecutive plays at one point, spanning 2 drives, of course, but 3 consecutive offensive plays for the Bears ended in sacks. There were end-of-half shenanigans again. The Bears gave up a 53-yard touchdown run with 12 seconds left in the first half. This is after the Hail Mary fiasco, so end-of-half situations not favoring the Bears right now. They had just kicked a field goal to make it 9-14, and they should have been able to take it to half down 5, and then all of a sudden they're down 21-9. That touchdown rush was a 14.2% win probability swing for the Cardinals. And the Cardinals didn't do a ton through the air in this game. Kyler was 13 of 20 for 154 yards. He took 3 sacks, but they rushed for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the Cardinals now sit atop the NFC West with a half-game lead on both the Rams and the 49ers, which is certainly not something that you would have thought we would be saying before the season started. Okay, let's go to Green Bay. This was supposed to be one of the biggest game of the week. Detroit at Green Bay. Detroit wins 24-14. And the Packers opened this game on a 14-play, 63-yard drive and kicked a field goal on a 4th and 5 at the 12. The Lions answered with a 13-play, 70-yard drive, except they didn't settle for the field goal. They chose to go for it on 4th and goal. Well, they lined up to go for it on 4th and goal at the 5. They got a neutral zone infraction, and then they went for it on 4th and goal at the 3-yard line, and they scored a touchdown. Those 2 drives took the entire first quarter and the first 8 seconds of the second quarter. So it was really crazy start to the game. Both teams going on long drives, but the Lions just continued to push this lead out. They led 24-3 after they opened the second half with a touchdown drive. Jared Goff completed his first 11 passes in this game. He was 10 of 10 on under center play action passes in the entire game. And this is where the Lions get you. They're such a dominant running team. Their offensive line is so good. And then Jared Goff gets the under center play action game going, and they're so difficult to stop. The Packers were tough to stop too, though. They moved the ball at will. They outgained the Lions by 180 yards. But they shot themselves in the foot a few too many times. They had 6 drops in this game, 10 penalties. Jordan Love threw a pick 6 before the half, and they scored a touchdown on only 1 of 4 red zone trips. Jordan Love continues to turn the ball over. He's thrown an interception in all 7 of his starts this season. And this interception, that pick 6, was snagged by Kirby Joseph, and it's his 6th interception of the season, which ties Packers safety Xavier McKinney for most this season in the NFL. It's also his 14th career interception since he entered the league in 2022. And so since the year 2000, only Ed Reed has more interceptions among safeties in his first 40 games. I believe it was 16. And so Kirby Joseph off to a ball hawking start to his career as the Lions go to 7-1 for the first time since 1956. And they establish, a 2-game lead over their division now with this victory over the Packers. Got a comment coming in about the Lions that their offensive line is so good and they have a 2-headed rushing attack, so there's less wear and tear too. And yeah, that's absolutely right. David Montgomery gets 17 carries for 73 yards in this game. Jahmyr Gibbs has 11 for 65 and a touchdown. They get these guys involved in the passing game too. Montgomery had 3 catches. Jahmyr Gibbs had 1. And so it's a tough team. They're going to be a tough out. I think eventually you sell out to stop the run if you're trying to beat the Lions, because if you can mitigate the threat of the play action, you can force Jared Goff into traditional drop back passing. That's where you want to be. Goff's not the same quarterback that he was in LA, but that is still definitely the path you want to take to try to beat the Lions. But they're a tough team to play too, because Dan Campbell is going to be aggressive, and it's just that they're a very good football team, and they're going to be a lot of fun to watch down the stretch. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch in this division with games, still against the Vikings and the Packers coming up again. The NFC North is a lot of fun this year. So let's keep rolling and let's go to Seattle. And we got another overtime game here. 2 overtime games this week, but the Rams beat the Seahawks in overtime 26-20. And Matthew Stafford in this game was 22 of 41 for 219 yards, a touchdown, and an interception in regulation. But in overtime, he goes 3 for 3 for 79 yards and the game-winning touchdown after the Seahawks went for it on 4th and 1 from the 16-yard line on the opening drive of overtime, and they got stuffed. So they drive down. If they kick the field goal, the Rams get the ball, and a touchdown would win it for the Rams. They decide to go for it. They get stuffed, and then the Rams go get the touchdown anyways. And the Rams have gone from being potential trade line sellers to winning 3 straight games in a row, to climb out of that 1-4 hole. And now they're still only a half a game behind the Cardinals for the division. So the Rams are a fun upstart team. Geno Smith made some big mistakes in this game. He threw 3 interceptions, 2 of which were in the red zone to rookie safety Cameron Kinchens, one of which he returned 103 yards for a touchdown. And that is the longest defensive touchdown in Rams history. On that play, Kinchens traveled 128.3 yards from the snap to the score, which is the most by any player on a score this season. For the Seahawks, Jackson Smith and Jigba had a huge game with DK Metcalf out. He had 7 receptions for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett added 63 yards and a touchdown. And Geno Smith was sacked 7 different times in this game by 7 different guys. Now, technically, Braden Fisk had 2, and 2 guys split a sack, but it was a group effort. A lot of guys were getting pressure on Geno Smith. And got a question, what do we make of the Rams defense at this point? I'm not overly impressed by the Rams defense, but I do think that, they've got a lot of young guys and they got a lot of athleticism on their defense. And I feel like the Rams are a team that, when you've got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, and when those guys are healthy and Matthew Stafford's playing well, they could beat anybody. The problem is, Puka Nacua has been hurt. He got ejected from this game. Kyron Williams has been fine, but Cooper Kupp's been hurt. Matthew Stafford feels like he's been on borrowed time for years with some back and elbow and shoulder issues. And so this is not a team that I really feel like can consistently go win 3 games in a row in January. Could certainly be wrong, but it's a team I certainly wouldn't want to play with all those guys healthy. But it's got more to do with the offense than it does the defense for me. So, okay, let's get into our final game, the Sunday night football game. This was the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings won 21-13, and they stop a 2-game skid on the backs of their defense. They had 3 turnovers in this game. All 3 belonged to Sam Darnold. He had 2 picks and a fumble. They missed 2 field goals, and yet they end up winning the game. On the opening drive of the game, Harrison Smith recovered a Colts fumble after the Colts drove into Vikings territory. And then Darnold answered with an interception in the end zone before the punting game started. And there was a 4-drive sequence later in the game that spanned the entire fourth quarter that went fumble 6, missed field goal, missed field goal, missed field goal. So it was just a lot of poor execution in this game. Darnold did throw 3 touchdowns, and he only threw 6 incomplete passes, 28-34. Just unfortunate 2 of those were intercepted. But Sam Darnold, I don't know, man. I don't trust Sam Darnold. Like he's played well at times. You feel like he's a little bit of a Justin Jefferson merchant, which you should be a Justin Jefferson merchant, but he also makes some of these big mistakes. Justin Jefferson had 7 catches for 137 yards in the game. He also had a 22-yard completion throwing the ball. 5 of his 7 catches were for 20 or more yards. And this was the 3rd time this season that Justin Jefferson has accounted for over half of the Vikings' air yards. So, Justin Jefferson's a beast. I think I go back and forth on this, like A.J. Brown versus Justin Jefferson. There's some Eagles bias in me that wants to say A.J. Brown. I think Justin Jefferson's still the best receiver in the NFL, and I think if he was playing in the Eagles quarterback situation instead of what the Vikings quarterback situation has been over the duration of his career, I think you would probably see that a little more clearly. But those 2 guys are such good receivers. But Justin Jefferson, man, he's so much fun to watch. On the Colts side, the Colts offense was lifeless. They bench Anthony Richardson, who hasn't been playing well. They put in Joe Flacco, who also didn't really play well. He was 16 of 27 for 179 yards and an interception. He also took 3 sacks. The rushing game was terrible. Jonathan Taylor had 48 yards on 13 carries. They end with 68 yards on 19 total carries. And to be honest, this wasn't a very good football game. This was a pretty bad football game to watch. I had a comment that they flexed the Eagles out for that garbage. And I mean, to be honest, the Eagles game was kind of garbage too, though. So hard to fault them there. I guess the Eagles game ended up being entertaining, but for all the wrong reasons. But there you guys have it. That is the Week 9 recap and reaction show. Mark should be back next week and be back a little more consistently after that. And I think, obviously the show's more fun for me when Mark's here. I think it's more fun for you guys too, because we can talk back and forth on our takes instead of you just getting my monologue. We'll go to final thoughts here, and I'll take Joe's question here from YouTube. Any key takeaways from this week? For myself, the Lions really separated themselves in the North. The Falcons should win the South easily, and the NFC West is wide open. I agree with all of those. I think the Packers could play with the Lions. They put up a lot of yards like we talked about in that game. They just shot themselves in the foot. And I think that the Lions, though, they're just a dominant team right now. And the way that they're playing football isn't likely to stop working. Like, you're not going to get into cold weather or to rainy weather outside in December or snowy weather in January and not be able to run the football. So much they're predicated on winning at the point of attack. I do have some questions about their defense. I would love to see them go and get a pass rusher at the trade deadline to help replace some of Aiden Hutchinson's lost production with his injury. But I think the Lions are clear favorites in the North. I think the Packers are going to be in the playoffs. I think the Vikings they're going to be in the playoffs. So I think you're going to have 3 playoff teams from the NFC North. And then the Falcons should win the South. The West is wide open. I don't know what my take is on. I keep telling myself that the 49ers are going to be okay. They're going to get healthy. They're going to go on a run, and they continue to not get healthy and not go on a run. So maybe they come out of the bye week and they're able to get healthy and get Christian McCaffrey back. If that happens, I think I would still take them as favorites. And then in the East, you've got the Eagles and the Commanders. And we'll find out a lot about those 2 teams in the next 2 weeks, with the Eagles at the Cowboys, the Commanders playing the Steelers, and then they play each other on Thursday night the following week. And so that'll be big. I think both teams probably make the playoffs. So that leaves me without a wild card team coming from the West. I think whoever gets in from the West is going to have to win the division. So 49ers are going to need to make a push here and regain some of that ground that they've lost early in the season. So there you go. That's kind of my thoughts on the NFC playoff picture. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for episode number 177 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, be sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. You can drop us a 5-star rating and review wherever you stream your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHalfNFL. You can harass Mark on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_ for making me do this solo again. Just saying. No, I'm just kidding. He'll be back next week. But thank you guys for joining. Check out all the other great shows on the feed. We'll have a lot more Eagles-specific content coming onto the Eagles Pinpool Network as the week goes on. You'll get Birds of the Roundtable. You'll get mine and Johnny's film show, Eye on the Enemy, the Kelly Green Hour, all that stuff coming your way. So stay tuned, and we'll catch you guys next time.